And Senator Lindsey Graham joins us. But before we get to this fiscal cliff, I'm curious, you have a meeting tomorrow with Ambassador Wright's Senators McCain and Ayotte. Why?
Well, she asked to meet with us, and I will listen to what she has to say about her role in Benghazi. But I can tell you this, the more I know about Benghazi, the more upset I am that the consulate was even open on September 11th. When you look at the history and the reporting coming out of Libya about the dangers, it should have never been open or heavily reinforced. During the attack, I'm more worried than ever why we couldn't help these people for 7 hours. And after the attack, I think the story we were told about a spontaneous event caused by video where a mob turned into a riot is less credible than ever, but I want to listen to her side of the story.
All right. Is it your thought, set aside Ambassador Rice for a second, but are you satisfied that the administration is providing information to the committees on Capitol Hill, or is there...
Absolutely not. They're stonewalling at every turn. They ran out the clock before the election, and the president says, now the election's over, we're going to cooperate. The most basic information about what happened on the night of the attack and what survivors had to say after the attack is not being provided, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But long story short is I know very little from this administration about what happened in Benghazi, and what I'm finding out on my own makes me very upset.
Why do you think that Ambassador Rice is coming up on the Hill? Do you think it's because she's sort of trying to test the waters for if she's nominated?
I have no idea, but I'll be glad to talk to her. And again, it's not just about her. Why did the president, 7 days after she spoke, write this off as a video-inspired event when it's pretty clear to everybody early on this was a terrorist attack in a coordinated way? There was no mob that turned into a riot, and the riot that I've seen doesn't include heavy weapons and mortar trucks.
Do I take it you're going to ask very direct questions?
I'm going to ask very direct questions because it's my job. You know, President Obama had no problem challenging the Bush administration, and the Bush administration made a lot of mistakes. When I went to Iraq with John McCain, we didn't come back and say all was well. John McCain asked for Rumsfeld to resign. It wasn't a few dead enders in Iraq. The storyline given by the Bush administration wasn't accurate based on what we saw on the ground. The storyline given by this administration about Libya doesn't match up with what happened on the ground.
Does it match up, or is a lie or deceitful and directed?
That's what we're trying to find out. And the more I look into what they were telling us on the 16th, the 18th, and the 25th, days after the attack, the more it sounds like a political smokescreen rather than a confused situation.
One last question, is the Senate going to create select committees so that this would get to the bottom? Because, I mean, one of the problems, people are always suspicious that the intel committees are chummy with the intel community and they don't ask the probing questions, so you might want someone with fresh blood.
I think we would be well served to have one group of senators from all the relevant committees interview each witness and compare notes. The DOD, the Department of State, and the CIA all should be interviewed by a select committee so we can get the same story from each group and be able to compare notes. This stovepipe approach is not the right way to go.
All right, fiscal cliff. Right. You are not in favor of raising the tax rates.
Right.
But you are not opposed to other revenue methods. First of all, have the Democrats put any cuts on the table? Because I know there's a lot of criticism by the Republicans that there are no cuts put on the table by the Democrats.
Okay, here's what I think we need to do to save the country long-term and short-term. The fiscal cliff, if we don't do something by the end of the year, tax rates go up on everybody. The child tax credit changes, the marriage penalty changes. Everybody in the country gets hit, and they get hit hard. The military will get major league cuts beginning January 2013. It'll be the smallest Navy since 1915, the smallest Army since 1940, the smallest Air Force in the history of the country. So doing nothing is a catastrophe. Here's what I think is fair to ask of Republicans. We have about 15% of GDP in revenue. The historical average is 18% coming to the federal government. One way to generate more money without hurting job creation is cap deductions. If you limited deductions to $50,000 per person, which would take care of the middle-class person and then some, you could raise about $750 billion in new revenue. To do what? To pay down debt, because we're so deep in debt, we need more money to get out of debt, and to lower tax rates for the corporate rate and other rates to create more jobs. I'm willing to put revenue on the table to pay down debt and create a better economy. But my Democratic friends have to reform entitlements. What will make us Greece is not raising taxes. What will make us Greece is not fixing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. In about 30 years, Medicare and Medicaid alone will consume all the revenue coming in taxes. These are unsustainable entitlement programs, and they have to be reformed to save the program and to keep the country from going into a Greek-like status. There's $8.6 trillion of unfunded liability in Social Security. To make it solvent for the next 75 years, you'd have to put $8 trillion in the bank today. For Medicare, it's 3 times that. So if you don't reform entitlements, then you're never going to avoid becoming Greece.
All right. Is there any appetite for reform? We're sort of a situation where post-election, Democrats have the wind behind the back. The president does on this. So is there any appetite for it, or is it just going to be a bloodbath?
Well, there's a lot of Democrats who understand that Medicare, Social Security runs out of money in 2033. Medicare runs out of money in 2024. So these programs literally go bankrupt. If you want to save them, you have to restructure them. Younger people need to work longer, and me and you, we make enough money where we could pay more into the system without losing our quality of life. Age adjustment and means testing will help save these programs. But when I mentioned putting more revenue on the table, I put one condition on it. I want the other side to do something hard too. Reform entitlements like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did to save Social Security. And when I said that, Senator Durbin said, well, you don't need to do anything to Social Security. It doesn't add to the debt today, but it's going to swamp us in the future, and the program's going to go bankrupt. Why would you just raise revenue and not deal with what got us into $16 trillion to debt to begin with, and that is entitlement programs that are unsustainable. So I expect my party to do something hard and uncomfortable only if the other party will, and together we need to reform entitlements.
Senator, thank you. Always nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.